Hi everyone, it's Steph from Stellium Astrology and the Stellium Astrology podcast here. And I'm just tuning in today because I wanted to do a brief show on Saturn in Pisces. And I wanted to just go through the signs and roughly what it's going to do or mean for each of the signs. So let me just share my screen with you, just using the wonderful Astro Whiteboard tool. So for Saturn's moving into Pisces on the 7th of March in the UK, but it's basically going in from 7th of March till February 2026. So it's going to be there for quite a while. And the last time Saturn was in Pisces was from May 1993 to April 1996. So it's possible that there's a reason why there's a bit of a 90s revival going on at the moment, an 80s/90s revival. And particularly in 1993, what I find interesting is that we had 3 Uranus-Neptune conjunctions. And with Saturn in Pisces, it means that Saturn was in mutual reception with Neptune. Neptune was in Capricorn. Mutual reception means that Saturn and Neptune, being the rulers of Capricorn and Pisces, were in each other's signs or around each other's houses, kind of house sitting on like an exchange holiday or something. So I just wanted to go through the signs really quite briefly and hopefully not get too wordy. I've got a list here that I've written in my notebook, which it just helps me to pull my ideas together. So yeah, this isn't like a super long, in-depth show, just a bit of a nugget of insight, I think. Now for Aries, I've just placed Saturn in Pisces here, as you can see. For Aries, Saturn will be in your 12th house. And actually, Saturn is the ruler of your 10th and your 11th. So let's have a look at Saturn's journey and how he relates to where he is and where he's come from. In 2017, I think December 2017, Saturn entered Capricorn. So let's think of this as like a sense of graduation and growth. Now, around that time, you will have been working a lot on your career and what it is that you defining how you want to be seen in the world, and building on your reputation. And then his time through Aquarius, you will have been building on your networks and building up your kind of shared kind of resources with other people. In context, it could be social media and building up your social media profiles and really developing a following. Now, I think also what's interesting with Saturn's journey from the 10th and the 11th house in your chart, and also through Capricorn and Aquarius, mostly through Aquarius actually, is when we had the pandemic. So the pandemic hit in I think it was it was in 2020, but the Saturn-Pluto conjunction happened on the 12th of January 2020, and that was at 22 degrees of Capricorn. And then after that, Saturn moved into Aquarius for a little while, and we suddenly got the term social distancing and I think something like social bubbles as well. That was a word that came up. And then he dipped back into Capricorn and then came back out and then moved through Aquarius. And he's now reaching the final degrees of Aquarius and will be moving into Pisces, and no retrograding back out. He will be in Pisces now, like I said, up until February 2026. So he's in for keeps when he goes in this time. So essentially, for you, Aries, Saturn has kind of built on his reputation in your career house, and he has helped to develop a network or a social media following. But now he's dipped into the 12th house. There's a sense of defining what you can do to serve the collective. The 12th and the 6th houses have a nice kind of sense of service about them, and also where we use our gifts. And sometimes it's where in the 6th house, it's where we use our gifts to help others, and in the 12th house, it's where others use their gifts to help us. I think what you have to do is you have to be quite discerning about who you trust, as far as allowing people in your life to help you with their gifts, because the 12th house isn't a very clear place. It's quite nebulous. It's a great time for dream work. It's a great time for if you wanted to learn hypnotherapy or undergo hypnotherapy in order to unpick aspects of your unconscious or subconscious. I've also got here, yes, so working with collective suffering. And, you know, as Saturn is the ruler of your 10th house, it could be that if you're doing work where you work with clients, for example, you would attract quite sensitive types. So actually, you know, it could be about learning how to handle people with sensitivities or potentially work on your own personal sensitivities. It can be sometimes an area of low energy, particularly when Saturn moves into the 12th house in any chart. It is a time where you have to kind of do a lot more inner work, as opposed to the going out and being more present and public. It's more about sort of being introspective and reflective. And yes, like I said, being mindful about who you trust in order to work with or work on, or even just allow into your inner circle, because the types of people who come into this nebulous realm with you aren't always clear on their own personal journey. I guess you could call it like time for copycats even, because people may find what you're doing interesting and go out and do it themselves, possibly if you reveal your game plan too soon. You know, obviously this means when we have a look at this, that the graduation period from Saturn moving from the 12th and in February 26 crossing over into your first house, Aries, it means essentially that whatever you do now, bringing Saturn from your 10th through to the 11th and down into your 12th, the foundations that you're laying, or the work you're doing, the personal work that you're doing, when he crosses into your ascendant, you will be working with Saturn in a much more present way. So be aware that he is in the background. He's, you know, it's possible that you're working with other people with quite Saturnian ambitions, and that if you're too free with your ideas and your plans and generous with your time, people will take advantage if you are surrounded by those types. It's not a bad thing, actually. It's a good time for learning about boundaries. It's a good time for learning about grounding and protecting yourself. And I did an episode on that, so I'll have to remember to tag that. So let's move on to Taurus. I've kind of put for Taurus, and let's move Taurus onto the ascendant here. And for Taurus, Saturn is in your 11th, so he's moved from your 9th through to your 10th and your 11th. In fact, for Taurus, it's been currently present in your 10th house, so you've probably been making waves as far as you know, career is concerned, and establishing yourself as an authority in some kind of community setting, for example. Not necessarily quite as simple as this, but just as an example, you know, being somebody that, you know, the community can look to for guidance in some way, whether the community is working in an area or a profession where you are working, you know, as, like, for example, like a community midwife, for example, or potentially, you know, an online community, for example. And this will, this has come from a period of perhaps a shift in your perspective and your philosophy in life. Maybe you took a change in career when Saturn went into Capricorn back in December 2017. Maybe you relocated, for example. Maybe you came from overseas and decided to settle elsewhere, and this period has been a challenge, sort of defining your true worth through what you do as a career. And ultimately, you know, forming networks. I know if you have relocated, myself personally relocating, it can take about 5 years to really establish friendships. But Saturn here moving into your 11th, you may well be establishing some true connections that are fulfilling to you, and help you to feel understood if you are feeling a bit like a fish out of water in your friendship groups. It's also, I kind of guess, you could say that with Saturn in Pisces, there's a sense of dream team when you've got it in the 11th house. It could be that you find the people that you really relate to, not just in a friendly context, but also in a professional context. And that actually, you know, finding a way to work together to bring, you know, a shared idea or goal into fruition. Yes, I've got here like-minded folk with a philosophy, collaborating for a cause, networking to bring clarity around victimization, for example, because obviously Pisces can be a sign that feels quite disempowered sometimes. And when Saturn moves in, it could be that there's clarity around this and how to, again, set boundaries. It's important with Saturn in Pisces. It's a repeated idea, having boundaries. So here we are, Gemini with Saturn in Pisces. Saturn happens to be sitting up in your 10th house. Well, you know, not every house system means that the 10th house is, you know, also the midheaven. However, with equal, with Placidus, for example, the 10th house and the midheaven are the same thing. With equal, the midheaven can indicate other areas where you are, you know, with your career and family insights, whereas you know, you can have that extra insight with the equal house system because the 10th house and the midheaven are separate. So we've got this enhanced insight into your career area, Gemini, and it may be that you have been working in a place where you are dealing with, let's have a look. So the 8th house and the 9th house have been transited, and Saturn is currently just sitting about here somewhere, waiting to move over into your 10th. And you can probably feel that because it's quite present in your chart. It's sitting quite high. When he moved into Capricorn, it was probably a time where you were carrying a lot of responsibility, and dealing with a lot of bureaucracy, bank managers, maybe mortgage advisors, people who are middlemen in order to achieve some kind of legality or crystallization through commitment, or not necessarily, you know, romantic commitments, but commitments, contracts and that kind of thing. Also, it is the area of mystery. I connect it to spirituality sometimes. So having Saturn moving through your 8th house can make you want to get real about some kind of connection that you have with the stuff on the other side of the veil, for example, or even just delving into the depths of psychology and psychotherapy is one way of doing it. Moving through into the 9th house, it probably was a time of dealing with a shift in your, I say, philosophy, defining a new kind of future for yourself, and potentially, you know, not just seeing your future in your local area, but actually maybe thinking about like going further afield and maybe even retraining and studying and doing something completely different. But when it goes into your 10th house, this is where you really get to define who you are and define your image and your career. This is a time for you to really bring some kind of therapeutic element to what you do, because Saturn has been flavored with that 8th house kind of therapeutic, introspective, again, because it's a water house kind of flavor. And actually, you know, you've been clarifying. This has been a time where you've been building on and developing and learning, and defining your gifts. And this is where you get to bring your gifts into the world and be seen, kind of bringing it all together, essentially. So let's have a little look and see what else I've put. Oh, I actually wrote for that one, tell me about your mother. It made me think of Freud, actually. You know, Saturn on ruling the 8th and then moving into the 10th. So here we go. So now we have Cancer rising, Cancer sun. You have Saturn in your 9th house. And it's funny because I've been speaking to some Cancerians and they have been dreaming of the seaside. This house, you could, I mean, there's plenty of places that you can find dreams and aspirations in the chart. But this really feels like the place where we can dream big in the 9th house. And maybe this is going to turn your dreams into reality. If you've been dreaming about being by the seaside, at least booking yourself a holiday, or finding a way to get in touch with the ocean, or be near to the ocean or water in some kind of context. You know, Saturn will have moved through your relationships and into your 8th house, and now into your 9th. So again, there's been a sense of development as it's moved through. Potentially you may have got serious about your relationship at some point along the line, or, you know, some kind of shared responsibility. And then, you know, I think that things can feel quite intense when Saturn moves through the 8th house. So perhaps you've been going through a period of intensity, and not necessarily undergoing therapy, but maybe you feel like you need to. But there is a sense that with you, Cancer, that once Saturn comes out of the underworld, the subterranean depths of the 8th house, you are going to find yourself feeling a sense of maybe therapy through doing something creative, and not just therapy, but actually seeing a new way to interact with your environment and connect with a sense of joy that perhaps has been absent from your life for a little while. Not necessarily saying you've been down in the dumps and depressed, but potentially there have been a lot of responsibilities and a lot for you to do. So it's possible that actually this could feel a lighter shift for you. It's going to be trine your ascendant as well, and also your 5th house. If you think about the way that Saturn can communicate with fluidity through the water signs while we are experiencing this transit. And if you have, for example, a water sign, a water sun, or a water rising sun, or even a water moon, Saturn's going to be communicating in an easier and more flowing way with that. So this connects the houses of identity and vitality with your passions and your joys, and also with your philosophy and your future vision, essentially. So it may be that you actually can, you know, seriously see an alternative future for yourself, or a future which potentially could even feel a bit easier for you, because you've already done some of the hard work. You've already done a lot of the Saturn. Let's see what else I got here. Oh, a song for you guys for the Cancerians is Kokomo by the Beach Boys, which I love that song anyway, but it's one that really helps you to dream about. I think it's really paints a picture of that kind of tropical like holiday feeling. Yes, so a graduation from the chaos. I think it's going to clear the chaos for you, Cancer, if you've been feeling that for a while. Leo, I sense a big commitment coming, whether that's marriage or mortgage, or some kind of contract for you. I know that you can't always see this house and see children, but children are ultimately a product of two become one, as the Spice Girls would sing. How am I flashing back to the 90s again? There is a sense that you have done a lot of hard work and you've been putting in the hours. You have possibly had to manage some unusual types of people if you're in that kind of leadership Leonine realm. I would say that you know, there's definitely been an unconventional aspect to your relationships and your friendships and your collaborations, and maybe you've been struggling. Maybe some people have been total blockers for you, but in some aspects you've been sifting the wheat from the chaff. So, you know, the people who are really here for the long haul, as opposed to the people who are just here for your fair weather friends. I think it was Bob Dylan who says that. Anyway, so Saturn in the 8th, like I said, it can be bank managers. It's definitely contract solicitors, getting serious, mortgages, possibly, you know, it may be that your career, you decide to do something that it takes a little bit more of a serious turn, and it makes you feel a little bit more like you're ready for something a bit more, when I say meaningful, I think maybe more helpful, or you might be attracting people that demand you to go a bit deeper. Maybe doing a first, what's it called? A mental health first aid course. That's right. Mental health first aid is a course that you can do. And maybe you might be attracting, particularly through your work, people who are going through crisis, and perhaps you are able to be an anchor for those people through crisis. Or it could just be that you are taking an interest in doing something a bit more psychological, and doing that kind of deeper work. Yeah, I think that, you know, for you, it does seem that relationships are getting more serious. So you don't always see the 8th house as the marriage house. However, it is the sign of commitment. It is the house of commitment. Sorry. You know, there's always a contract to be signed, and marriage, if nothing else, is a contract, if you break it down to the bare bones. Yes, transforming your relationships and crystallizing your commitments is what I could see there. Virgo, you have got Saturn in your 7th, which again is a time for getting serious in your relationships. It could be that you do decide to make things more serious, make that bigger commitment. It's a time, often with Saturn in the 7th, is a time of make or break. If there are, you know, if there are sort of leaks in the bucket or the barrel and there's water escaping, it's not totally watertight, then this could be the time when, you know, you realize that you have been filling other people's cup and not your own enough. If you are thinking more about, you know, if you can see that that can actually work, because you can actually mend the leaking and, you know, plug those holes, and actually that this Saturn in your 7th house in Pisces actually feels a little bit more like an anchor than a leaky barrel, then this could be a good time for you to get serious. We've already had him moving through your 5th house, which is, you know, for a lot of Virgos, I know they've finally had a chance to connect with their inner joys and to do something that they care about and feel passionately about. Maybe you've had children and you've had to rethink your whole journey, and actually through that process have rediscovered a sense of your own, discovered a whole new aspect of yourself, and then had to find a way to make work for you, for example, or connect with something that gives you total autonomy and freedom through what you do in your career. It may be that at this point you are looking to find a way to work in partnership with other people that can make that a possibility. So that's another way of looking at it. But ultimately, yes, Virgo, I think that it looks like going steady is an option for you, or going it alone is another. Don't be scared of that, because if you have been in a relationship for a long time, then there's a lot of learning to do about yourself and rediscovering your own personal joys if you have skipped that stage of your development. But yeah, it's really important to do the personal work. What was it? Do the personal work, don't just share the memes. That's what they say, isn't it? Libra, you have had an interesting journey as well, traveling through our 4th, 5th and 6th houses. Work is taking a forefront for you, and this could be quite responsible work. It's also about taking your health seriously, and understanding that, you know, there's a sense, I think there's a real wanting to do work in service in some way, and offer people an opportunity to be accountable for themselves by being that rock and that solid presence in people's lives. You know, the house of servitude and also oppression and slavery, as it used to be known, which is basically the day job and the grind, which the majority of us have to do. Saturn entering this could be about assuming a sense of authority through what you do, definitely taking on quite a workload, I'd imagine. And, you know, it feels like there's been a lot of changes and a lot of personal work done here as it moves through your emotional basement or the 4th house. in Capricorn, and perhaps understanding some of the hardships that you've endured through family life and through your familial connections and your heritage, and through unconventional but ultimately fulfilling joyful pursuits through the 5th house, whether that's through you know, relationships and babies, and the very literal expression, whether it's through love affairs and romance, or whether it's through just you know, discovering who you are and what you really are passionate about, whether it's knitting, cross stitch, quilting, shell collecting, astrology, spiritual practice, and you know, art, creativity, all of those kind of things. And you know, ultimately discovering your inner child and healing that inner child, that perhaps the personal work you did since 2017 was disrupted, as you kind of had to face truths, and not just truths, but you know, holding yourself accountable or others accountable for certain aspects of your situation. Not that it's not a bad thing, it's all positive, because now you're able to help to serve other people who have equally suffered hardships through perhaps upbringing, and through what's the word I'm looking for, hardships through their environment, as opposed to necessarily the things, kind of like the things that you're born into, you've got no help with. You can't help that. You have to kind of develop and grow through that yourself. So quite rewarding time, actually, Libra. As we move through, oh, by the way, I also said true romance, because I like the idea of Saturn and Neptune in Pisces coming together. This is really the like, it feels like really doing productive work with people who feel like victimized or disempowered, Libra. Okay, so moving on to Scorpio, we have Saturn in the 5th house. If you are a Scorpio who is already intensely passionate, it's going to get real. It's really time to get real. I actually think it's about bringing thought forms to life. The 3rd house here being the house of ideas, which is where Saturn started out in 2017 and is connected to this area as we interpret. We have bringing thought forms to life. So any of the ideas that have been percolating, and anything that you have been kind of processing and connecting with on a really deep level through this 4th house, whether it's through a new local area, defining what family means to you, and then moving into the 5th house, which is about doing work with children, or connecting with your personal joys. It's about expressing what you do through creative endeavors, and the idea of a thought form, which is something, I think, I don't know who coined that term, but I know Neil Gaiman works with it a lot, and it is a kind of a magical, occult kind of practice, creating thought forms, creating images and symbols, characters, which ultimately take on a life of their own the second they are thought of and brought into reality. Scorpio, you are the magical, I personally think, one of the most magical signs of the Zodiac. It's about literally being the magician tarot card and being able to command all the elements and bring into reality whatever it is your heart desires. I genuinely feel this. But you know what? Like I said, there's a lot of work down here on the depths and the subterranean aspect of the chart here, which is always out of sight, this 3rd and 4th house cusp, which I think as Saturn is birthed out of the 4th house, you're able to do a lot of your creative work and process some of that stuff that you've dealt with while in those subterranean realms, and bring life to them, whether that's through artistic endeavors, or whether it's through working with children or young people, and doing you know, doing stuff that makes your heart sing. Being real about what you want. Fulfillment comes in many forms. Yeah, it doesn't have to be, you know, if you're a woman who's questioning whether or not you can have children, am I too old now? Saturn in the 5th house. Do I really want that because it's such a heavy responsibility? Well, you know what? maybe children aren't, it's not for everyone. It's about finding true fulfillment, and it doesn't have to be through that route, you know, the route that often is pushed upon us by society's idealistic concept of what completes a woman. So now we have Saturn in Pisces for Sagittarius. Sagittarius, you are worth it. You've been working hard. You've been building the foundations. You've been laying the foundations, and enough of a foundation that there's a house built around you right now, and you're putting your roots down. Perhaps you've not felt that you have had true roots ever, because, you know, Pisces on the fourth house cusp can be a little bit wishy-washy and a little bit vague. So now is the time for you, Sagittarius, with all your gifts of future vision, your perceptive ability, and your truly inquisitive nature, and a real gift for, you know, you have this real likability, very affable, I find, with Sagittarius, that they have this gift of, and have been working on for such a long time. I'm trying to remember now when Saturn went into Sagittarius, but you know, there was a sense of not really having that much freedom, and then working really hard on what it was that you cared about and your values as you moved into Capricorn, really building a sense of stability for yourself, and then moving into the third house, which is about building networks and you know, really kind of crystallizing your message and your ideas, and showing people that you're true to your word and you're impeccable with your word. And now moving into the fourth house, which has been a crossover into doing a lot of personal work, creating a sense of belonging, if not for just yourself and a family, if you have one, but also for maybe the community that you've been serving through the third house, and helping those people who are living in an alternative kind of realm to everybody else, you know, helping those people that have felt lost or ostracized or out of their, you know, not really, they're outsiders essentially, who haven't had a voice, and you've been able to help them find that voice, or at least be that voice for them and fighting for that cause. You know, there's a sense of creating something that feels like a family to you and to those people as well. I've also got here laying your foundations, that building the bricks higher, the family ties, and understanding your true value. So Sagittarius, it looks like, you know, if you don't have a family, it can be about defining or redefining what family is to you. And yeah, it could be about creating your own. But it's definitely about being accountable and being responsible, taking on more as far as that's concerned. It can even be working from home, or bringing your home closer to your work. So lots of food for thought for you there, Sagittarius. Now, Capricorn, you have tirelessly worked through Saturn moving into your first. You've had Pluto there too, and that's about to shift. So life's going to feel a little bit different, and possibly a little bit. It's almost like a graduation process for Capricorn. The graduates, the current graduates of the Zodiac, with Pluto moving out of your sign as well. But that's a whole different show. Hopefully, I'll get one of those done in time for you. But yes, Capricorn, things got real back in 2017. Life got heavier, work got more responsible. You had to deal with more of the real yawn factor as far as that was concerned. You had to hold yourself accountable. You had to grow up. And then, you know, as you stuck with it and you continued to build and work as Saturn moved through your second, and to lay foundations in the areas that you wanted to succeed in, and you were serious and you didn't engage in much fun. I can talk about this with a bit more knowledge, as I am Capricorn myself, as you know. However, you know, this has been a time of really building and defining your own worth and what you really care about, learning about what's your true priority, essentially. So it could have been a lot of questioning about what's really important. And if you are in conflict about what you truly care about and what really makes you happy, as opposed to what other people think you should be doing, which Capricorn cares about. Capricorn actually cares a lot about what other people think. You know, they care about their reputation. They want to be seen in a certain light because they don't like to be seen in a negative one. So, you know, if you've been battling with a sense of how other people want to see you as opposed to how you want to see yourself, or how you do see yourself and how other people's expectations weigh on you, I think at this point there's a sense of resignation, and you have to surrender to the truth. And that truth is ultimately who you are. So with Saturn moving across here into Pisces, you have to be, the way that you see yourself and your inner monologue becomes your more definitive direction in life. The true ruling thoughts in your mind are your true your inner truth, essentially, the way that you want to be, the way that you guide yourself. The thoughts, I literally was speaking to somebody with a Capricorn moon, a Pisces with a Capricorn moon, how apt. And I was saying that, you know, a lot of the time these thoughts keep coming up for me, these ideas I keep having, and I keep coming back to them. And she said, that is the truth. These things that come up for you constantly are the things that are ultimately what you want for yourself, and what feels right. And then once you've made that decision, once you've defined what it is that you're doing, and you've clearly said yes to this, you've hammered that down and you've literally earthed it like hitting a nail into wood. You've literally connected that point. You can then decide, did I put that in the wrong place? Is that right? That feeling you have when you look at it and you decide whether it has been nailed in the right place or not, is your true compass telling you what's right and what's wrong. So actually, it feels like for Capricorn, we are now ready to hang the picture that has been painted in our mind's eye through years of hard work and dedication, and a lot of personal work, to define what it is we want and who we are. And now you get to decide whether or not you think the picture's wonky, or whether or not it needs a little bit more work. But this is about defining your message. And with Pisces in the third house, maybe your message is a little bit more about imagery, as opposed to writing an academic text. It could well be that your third house is your poetic, artistic self expressing itself and doing creative work, ultimately stepping into your creativity, and ultimately having the freedom to do so, or working on that if you don't quite yet have that total freedom. So Capricorn, it feels a little bit like you're being let off the hook finally. Hooray! Okay. Saturn for Aquarius is moving into his second. Now, Saturn, you've had, Aquarius, you've had Saturn moving through your 12th house, which is very nebulous and very unclear. So it could be that from 2017 up until 2020, things were vague and you weren't sure about whether or not you were clear on what you wanted to do or how you wanted to steer your ship. But as soon as he moved into your first house in around 2020, this is when things got very serious. And for you, you understood what you needed to keep and what things needed to go. Obviously, this was when the pandemic was occurring. So for Aquarius, it's been an incredibly trying time. And I would imagine that during this period, you've really defined what it is that you want to do and how you want to spend your life. Because with Capricorn and Aquarius, particularly during this period, a lot of heavy stuff has been going on in your signs, and it is ultimately asked you whether or not you want to be, you know, how authentic have you been? How honest have you been with yourself? Those of you who have been dealing with Saturn moving through your first house, you Aquarians, have had an intensified sense of accountability during this period, and your workload may have been quite heavy. Things may have been particularly difficult, but you've got something to focus on. You ultimately know that the hard work you've been doing is going to pay off. And when Saturn moves into Pisces, this can be about dreaming about ultimately how you want to take that payment. Whether this, it's also about rearranging your value system and understanding what's truly important, proving to other people that, you can do things your way. Because Aquarius has to dance to the beat of their own drum. And if they're dancing the beat of somebody else's drum, which is often the case when they have Saturn moving through their sign, then it can feel like they are out of control in some way. And the only way that they can be in control is by controlling the little things around them. But ultimately, this is about stepping in, again, just like Capricorn, into a sense of creativity. And this sense of creativity could be actually a lucrative source of income for you. It might be financially lucrative. It may also be spiritually lucrative and feeding your soul in some way, which ultimately frees you from some of the more restrictive aspects of your life. Aquarius, it has been an extremely tough time with Saturn moving through your sign. But when Pluto moves in, which is going to happen also in March, so you kind of have a shift from one planet which has represents an area of chaos almost for you, and you being the anchor in that chaos. I think that's literally what I wrote down for you. The one constant I've written here, anchor when everything else has been crazy, organizing the chaos, steering the ship, but also it's time for payday. You may have proved your worth to people and it's time to ask for that pay rise. You may have proved your worth to yourself and realize it's time to go, because you don't need to continue to prove yourself to for other people to see your value. If you're not feeling valued, it's time for you to go off and do your own thing in your own way, and do it in a creative way as well. So let's move through to Pisces. We got there, Pisces. I'm sorry I left you till last, but you're used to it. Yeah, maybe I should do it differently another time. Ultimately, for you, Pisces, this is about coming into your own. You have developed a support network. You have got people around you that I think you can trust. I think when Saturn moved into this area of friendships for you, you created some very strong connections, and the people that weren't really here for the long haul didn't make it through that time. And you've had now Saturn moving through your 12th. So it could be at this time that you have been subject to elements beyond your control. It can be that you had to be an anchor, or that there was some kind of anchoring for you, which ultimately put you in a place where you were receiving a sense of understanding collective pain and suffering in some way. Maybe you were working with people who were unwell. You could have found yourself in a hospital setting, for example, but maybe that's not the case and you aren't working with that kind of setting. Maybe you found yourself in a very Piscean environment, because obviously Saturn is in the 12th house here in Aquarius. So it could be that you wanted to be around people who were slightly unboundaried and connected beyond the initial immediate realms. Maybe pubs, maybe drinking, maybe drugs, maybe you have done a little bit of the self-sabotage, or maybe you've done a lot of the positive work and had clarity around those areas of your life and separated yourself from them. But as Saturn moves into your first house, this is about being personally accountable. This is about still carrying some weight on your shoulders, but ultimately this is redefining you and redefining your image. Maybe you're feeling ready to do a different kind of responsibility. Maybe you've been working where you've had to sacrifice yourself in order to help other people, and now you're ready to take it on, maybe learning and developing yourself in some way so that you can build yourself and steer yourself into being who you want to be, who you see yourself to be. This person who, if you've been working in a helping context, maybe it's about gaining a qualification, or maybe it's about instead of gaining a qualification, you know, doing some kind of professional development which helps you to reclaim a sense of your own personal identity through what you do. It certainly seems to me like this is a bit of a coming of age for Pisces, actually. And if you are, you know, if you were born in 1993 to 1996, then this will be the years of your Saturn returns. So this is a coming of age story for you anyway. If you happen to be, you know, older than that, you could be having your second or third Saturn returns. Ultimately, this is a period of reconnecting with your inner compass. You know, there is a ship within us, and with Pisces, you are with Saturn in Pisces, there's that anchor. So it's almost like creating some kind of clarity for you around what you want to do. So I've put coming into your own time to take responsibility for your dreams, and clarifying and making yourself accountable for your dreams. Neptune's sitting in here in your first house, and when Saturn and Neptune get together for their conjunction, this could really be a good time for you to clarify and form a sense of identity if you are lacking, or if you have your sense of identity, if you know who you are, then this could really be about realizing your dreams and the things that you've been working towards, or at least not realizing, but instigating that pathway to becoming who it is you visualize yourself to be and want to be. So I hope this has been helpful. This was just a very brief walkthrough. Yeah, it's been a very interesting morning for me. I'm going to have to shoot off now, but don't forget that you can enter the prize draw for the Monk's Astrology clock or personalized chart. All you have to do is sign up to the YouTube channel, hit subscribe. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to like it, and you know, share your comments with me about whether or not you feel like you've experienced some of that graduation process that I was describing through what Saturn's been doing for you so far and where you're going. Yes, so email me, stephanie@stelliumastrology.com, if you would like to be entered into that prize draw, and your YouTube channel is private, because I will not be able to see who you are. I will just see that I've got a subscriber. So if you can email me and also let me know what your YouTube handle is, that would be wonderful. But yes, like I said, I hope it's been useful, and I hope you all have a very happy Saturn in Pisces. I'm really excited about the future. I'm really excited about what's coming. I know there's lots of people that like to lean on the negatives, but actually there's always promise in everything. And Saturn, I think Patrick Watson Astrology tweeted the other day that ultimately Saturn is a benefic, because the hard work you put in with Saturn, if you choose to accept the challenge, ultimately is going to benefit you in the long run. So let's be positive and let's enjoy Saturn in his benefic glory, which is something that you may not normally hear. Take care, everybody, and I'll see you next time. Bye.